This morning we're going to talk about basically reproductive justice. And as I thought about how the conversation is held within my tradition, which is historically African American church, I realized that we really have much of a conversation around abortion. And as I began thinking about that, I was like, I wonder why we don't. But as I was talking to Tovins and Penny the other day, it struck me. And the reason is because historically, African Americans have been the victims of disparity, racial disparity, when it comes to health care. And that's been historical, and unfortunately, it's still happening today. If Serena Williams, as well known as she is, had to really demand the treatment that she knew she needed when she had her children and was in labor and all of that, there's still something really wrong and broken with the healthcare system when it comes to equity across the racial divide. And so I believe that what we focus on isn't so much whether someone chooses or needs to have an abortion or chooses to not, or that part of the process is really left to the person, their doctor, and their consultation with God. That's how it's left. But what we really do focus on is life once children get here. That's what we focus on, is life because getting children here, I mean, I was just having a conversation with my daughter the other day, and she was like, I keep reading horrible things. When I get ready to have a baby, it's gonna be the bathtub and a doula, and then we'll go to the hospital after that. Because there's still crazy, horrible things happening to women of color. And so we focus on life. It's funny, there are factions that say they're pro-life. We are also pro-life. We are also pro-life. Just because there is a need to terminate life doesn't mean that you're not pro-life. So in my tradition, we are absolutely pro-life. We're concerned about life when it arrives on this earth and keeping life healthy until it departs this earth. So that is the framing for the conversation from my tradition, and now Tovis is going to come and frame it from her tradition.
Thank you, Marlon. Hi, everybody. It's so good to be here, and welcome to our guests. So I'm so glad we have this opportunity today, as we've been trying to work it out for a couple years to have Planned Parenthood here. So I actually, after college, I worked at Planned Parenthood for a few years as a reproductive health specialist, which at the time was kind of a fancy name for being a general clinic assistant. And I did a whole range of things. And I worked in Providence, Rhode Island, and Menlo Park, California. And this was in the height of the 1990s culture wars, which, if you remember, I see it as sort of a precursor to our times now. And I had grown up without religion. And I knew very little about religion besides what people I was reading, like Mary Daly, radical feminist Mary Daly, were saying about religion, which was not very good, and what I experienced in the public sphere and at work, which was also not very good about religion. So working at Planned Parenthood in the mid-1990s convinced me that Mary Daly was right. Religion was obviously not only patriarchal, but downright dangerous for women. That's what my experience was. In Providence, I had to wade through throngs of conservative Christian protesters to get into the clinic on days that abortions were performed. And I felt threatened and violated every time, and I could only imagine what our clients were feeling. For most of the women I counseled at Planned Parenthood, the decision to end a pregnancy was painful, frightening, and often full of shame. And I was enraged that they had to be forced to undergo even more shame and fear just to get to the doors of our clinic to get basic medical care, which was indeed what we were offering. After the Christian anti-abortion activist John Salvi opened fire at 2 Planned Parenthood clinics in Boston in 1994, killing 2 and injuring 5, the Providence Clinic, where I was working at the time, started to be like a prison. There was security glass encased all around the reception area, completely floor to ceiling, and safety locks all throughout the clinics, the bulletproof vests doctors had to wear, police details in front of the building. And this was, of course, when abortion was legal. They were reminders always of the precarious status of women, especially those without many financial resources. As Marlon already pointed out, this is a justice issue and an equity issue. And the fact that people who were threatening us were motivated by their Christian faith fueled my belief that religion was deeply oppressive, especially for women. And strangely enough, this was an important juncture in my path to ordained ministry, because it led me to Harvard Divinity School, where I studied religion, gender, and culture for 10 years. And it was there that I discovered what all of us in this room already know, which is that when it comes to liberation and oppression, religion is a double-edged sword. It cuts both ways, as we know. That made it all the more interesting and engrossing to me. And I eventually made my way to Unitarian Universalism, a tradition that unequivocally defends the rights of bodily autonomy and publicly advocates for reproductive justice. But what I want to hold up for us all today about my story is this: that no matter what our tradition, we can't let politically conservative forms of religion dominate the public sphere. Those of us in this room know that there are other religious options that can be life-saving for people desperately in need of a faith that affirms their inherent worth and dignity, that affirms their gender identity and sexuality, that affirms their right to choose if, when, and how to bear a child. In our current political climate of polarization, when so much is at stake for so many people whose rights are under assault, we can't let Christian nationalism be the dominant moral narrative. We must be those religious alternatives. We have to be loud and bold and visible and powerfully acting and speaking in the public sphere so that our alternatives are available to the people who need them, and our moral voices are part of the narrative. And to do that, we need each other, we need the cohort, we need spaces like this, and we need partnerships like the ones that we are building today and we build with the organizations who we invite to speak to us. Amen? Amen. Amen.
Hi everyone, I'm Elizabeth Molina. I use she, her, ella pronouns, and I'm really excited to be in this space. As a child, I grew up in a very Catholic household. I have done all my sacraments, and if you were to tell me while I was sitting in catechism that I would be back in a faith-invited space talking about sexual and reproductive health, rights, and justice, I would not believe you at all, especially because then, as we heard, I thought that my religion hated me. I thought I was sinful, that I was ashamed, and that no matter how we introduced the topic, it was just shunned. It was not going to be talked about. I grew up in a single parent household when my mother passed away at a very young age. I realized how much this impacted myself and many other families who maybe were already growing up with single parents. I realized that we weren't being talked to about sexual health. When my period came around, my dad would just drop me off at the store. I would walk in and walk back out. So this was a taboo. It was very much topics that we never much shared about. So this is why I do the work. I think about children who are my age. I think about underserved communities. I think about children who have questions but feel ashamed to ask these things. But I also think about adults like myself when I accessed Planned Parenthood and they were there for me, about people and teenagers who maybe maybe don't have access to health care, but know that they have a safe place to turn to at Planned Parenthood. So this is why I'm here. This is why I continue to do the work that Planned Parenthood is doing. And this is why I'm so excited to be continuing to share a little bit about what Planned Parenthood does, why abortion access is still so important, and then also hear from Jan, our storyteller, as well, and a little bit more about our work in the faith leaders community. So with that being started, we can go ahead and go to the next slide. That was my just photo, so we can go to the next slide. So Planned Parenthood, right? Something that makes us unique. Yes, we provide healthcare services. That is a C3 organization. But what makes us unique as well is that Planned Parenthood also has another entity called Advocates of Marmonte. We usually say like our pink hats, our blue hats, or our pink hats. And our pink hats really allow us to protect our services. This is what is allowing us to lobby. This is protect our rights when we create legislation. This is where we are on the ground endorsing candidates, getting voters out there, engaging youth, having fundraisers to continue to protect those services. So we do so much unique work, and this is usually an arm that many people do not know about. Planned Parenthood, right? We invest in our communities through education, advocacy, and healthcare. Those are our three prongs that we do. Sorry, I messed up my slides, but we can go ahead and continue. Thank you, Chuck. I combined those in two. So, but what makes us, if we go ahead and continue to the next slide, I did want to kind of just break it down a bit, just because when you hear Planned Parenthood, many people may not know that it is our parent organization. It is a federal organization that doesn't necessarily provide health services, but it is our national level, and then it will go down to state, which are our Planned Parenthood Advocates of California. And within California, you'll actually learn that there's so many different other affiliates. So we have, I believe, 6 other affiliates in California, but we are the yellow one. We happen to be the largest chunk of Planned Parenthood Marmonte. And something just very unique about Planned Parenthood Marmonte, because people kind of ask, what's Marmonte? What is the difference between Planned Parenthood Marmonte? That is essentially what our affiliate is called. So we start from the ocean, which in Spanish is mar, so mar, and our territory ranges all the way up into the Sierra Nevadas. So northern Nevada, Sierra Mountain region, in Spanish is montaña. So Monte is where the name comes from. So if anyone ever asked us of Planned Parenthood Marmonte, that is just our affiliate name, which covers that region all the way from the coast all the way up into the northern Nevada Sierras. So that is us, but Planned Parenthood in the community. So next slide, Chuck. Why Planned Parenthood matters. It is so vital and a great resource in the community. Nowadays, 1 in 3 women in their lifetime that you meet will have visited a Planned Parenthood at some point. And that's just a visit, right? That doesn't necessarily mean what types of services, but that is a very, very low number, right? And I can attest to this because I love hearing so many stories from people who just come up to our table or booth, or just volunteers that I meet with, just being so grateful. Planned Parenthood has served so many people in our communities that maybe we aren't aware of. And we'll kind of get into it because we are learning that we are more than just birth control and abortion, right? Planned Parenthood is healthcare, and essential healthcare that many people who have been medically underserved can access. 1/3 do so here in California, actually. So this recent, right, since the overturning of Roe v. Wade, we've seen a 400% increase of out-of-state patients coming into the state. So this is just 1/3 do so in California. And it also being the largest affiliate with the most number of health centers is the reason why we are very accessible to many people. When you think of our health centers, we try to make sure that they are planned very appropriately, where they have access to transportation and so forth. As I mentioned, we're a network of 50 organizations And our local affiliate just this past year has served over 300,000 patients. So that is so amazing. I think that every single year it has been increasing, which can be a double-edged sword at times. But it is so amazing to be able to continue to provide access. But we are noticing this is because our rights and access are under attack in other states and other parts of the nation who maybe have seen that California has become the blueprint and the safe haven in protecting abortion rights and knowing they can access health care. We can go ahead and go to the next slide, Chuck. So as I mentioned, we are the largest affiliate in the country with 35 health centers across California and Nevada. And we're operating in two of the safest states for abortion care. The first one being Oregon. And we have 3 health centers here in San Mateo County, so South San Francisco, San Mateo, and Redwood City. Those are the 3 health centers closest to here, right? But you don't have to live in your county. You can access healthcare in any one of our other healthcare centers, which could be the easiest to get into. Our region really covers so many entities. Myself, I do want to kind of also inform y'all. So I am a grassroots organizer for the Silicon Valley Coast region, meaning that I actually only cover that orange piece. And in every single other region, we have different organizers and we have different directors who all are doing the same work as myself, but maybe experiencing different battles. Here, we can't necessarily relate that a lot of our elected officials are very progressive and are very much supportive of our rights, of our healthcare, whereas in maybe the Central Valley, or maybe in far northern of our Sacramento region in San Joaquin, isn't the same necessarily. They can be experiencing different issues, which I'll be getting a bit more into later. But we can go ahead and continue. So of our recent data collection, we do have less individuals, so that's why you'll see a different number. This is of the collected data of people filled out. We did primarily notice that a lot of our people who are accessing services are living below the poverty line, right? These are going to be marginalized people, groups of color, medically unserved, as we heard, right, historically. Predominantly in all of our health centers, throughout all our regions, have been Latinx, Hispanic communities. And to many shock, a lot of people also have the assumption or myth that Planned Parenthood is just for youth or teens, right? But we can see that the largest chunk of our patients actually come from adults, from 20 to 30, right? Which is an extremely important part of a woman's healthcare, people's healthcare, anybody with a reproductive system. So it's important that we are aware of the services that are here that can be provided, especially when we're able to do so many services. So with the next slide, please. We'll start to learn, right? Many services a lot of people are unfamiliar with. So gender affirming care, for example, I'm so excited to share that it is one of our services that's actually provided at every single one of our health centers. We practice an informed consent model, meaning that we don't require a therapist to sign off or for you to meet with, which has been a barrier through insurances historically for a lot of LGBTQ people who wish to access gender affirming care. We also actually have prenatal care. It is at only one of our health centers, but people are many surprised for that. We do prenatal care in the Central Valley. We have primary care health centers at many of our facilities throughout the Bay Area. We also do men's health care, right? So a lot of men tend to not maybe know that they can access primary care or any of their men's health care within Planned Parenthood, but we also see a bunch of men, and we've seen that number increasing. So we're hoping that they'll be able to come to us more as well. So there's so many services that Planned Parenthood provides that makes us, right, essential healthcare to the community, right, which many people oversee because of abortion stigma. Because when they think of Planned Parenthood, they just think of abortion, right? But I'm here to share, right, that Planned Parenthood is more. Planned Parenthood is gender-affirming care, life-saving care, cancer screenings, and so much more. I've heard stories of volunteers come up to me telling me that, oh, Planned Parenthood saved my life because they found my cervical cancer, or they found a mass in my breast that nobody else believed me, and I went there. So this is why it is important, the variety of services that we provide and share with the community. So I will go ahead and take us to the next slide. I'm trying to be cognizant of time. So a national status of abortion, right? As I mentioned, our reproductive rights have been under attack, and we've seen that also go into other areas like LGBTQ and book bans. So the national status of abortion, we see that it is a hot topic, right? It is on the ballot in many of the states upcoming this election. This past election, right, California voted to make it a constitutional right, and it is in our constitution, meaning that it's protected here. We are one of the 2 safest states operating here in California and Nevada. And recently, we've just seen more and more attacks, right? So mifepristone, a medication in abortion, that is the first pill, is currently in the lawsuit waiting to be heard from the Supreme Court, which would impact access to abortion federally, not just in Texas, but across the whole country. As you can see, right, we can't get too comfortable. We can see that other areas can still impact us. We also have other states, right, who are looking at passing many legislation when it comes to banning abortion really early on at 6 weeks, right? And many of us have understood, or if you are aware, right, a lot of people don't know that they're pregnant at 6 weeks, leaving with many people basically with no option, and really wanting to criminalize people instead of help them. I think California has really become the blueprint in spearheading that, making many protections legally, whether that is for the provider in other states so they're not criminally charged, and for the patient as well. But if we continue, thank you. Abortion access in California, right? I mentioned it's legal and protected, and we have the strongest protections. However, we can still present some barriers. So if you look at the map, those are all of our health centers. Geographically, this is kind of what is also an issue. So reproductive justice, this is where it kind of comes into play, right? The local fight on abortion can still endure within areas like the San Joaquin Valley, the Central Valley, and our neighboring Tri-Valley. Access deserts, what maybe you can call them, can be caused by many different things like severe provider abortion, lack of sex education, abortion access, LGBTQ community, right? A lot of discrimination, obstacles like costs, because we have to keep in mind, right, the Central Valley historically, right, is also have been medically underserved because they don't have many hospitals or health centers with them where they don't face stigma or discrimination. There in the Central Valley especially, we see a lot of political and cultural norms taking a role into healthcare, a lot of anti-abortion groups and crisis pregnancy centers. So for those who maybe are not familiar with crisis pregnancy are, so shorter for CPC, I'll say CPC. CPCs are, I would say, health centers. I don't want to call them health centers, but they are centers disguised as alternative options, but their ultimate goal is to persuade you into not getting an abortion. And instead of helping you, it could be a very traumatic experience. At times, they have shared, right, medically invalid information. We hear things like the abortion reversal pill, right? These things are not medically accurate. CPCs have done, right, as you can see, a lot of misinformation and damage to these areas where many people can be scared to access abortion care. One of my coworkers who has shared with us as a group and allowed me to share this story, she herself has accessed an abortion, but her hospital didn't want to provide her a referral. So she had to come all the way up here to the Silicon Valley, to Kaiser, for them to ask her, okay, yeah, no questions asked. But in the Central Valley, they didn't want to give her a referral because there wasn't a Kaiser around. And her doctor was like, my personal values and what everyone else agrees around with me doesn't agree with that. So you can try to figure it out on your own. And she did, luckily. But those are issues, real issues that people are facing. If we go ahead and continue, right, I mentioned the word abortion stigma, right? This abortion stigma, access in the U.S. has been disseminated because of it, right? And abortion stigma shows up in so many different ways in our life and at different levels. And what abortion stigma is, right, it's just a negative attitude, affects behaviors related to abortion. Feeling that you are, that someone has an inferior status experienced by people who seek abortions, right? So at an individual level, it can just be that you think you don't believe in abortion. But abortion stigma can be is institutional, and we must address the stigma within ourselves. But it could show up at a community level, right? In Tulare, we had a health center. We have a health center in Tulare County in Visalia. We have a health center, and it is a smaller health center, and we wanted to expand it. In the community, they did not agree with that. And something that is also that I want to share that is important information is that we actually don't offer in health center abortions at that. So surgical abortions at that health center. But the community was outraged to find out that we wanted to expand to be able to provide more access to patients, to provide more services daily and be able to just hold more patients. But to do that, right, we have to go through city and we have to go through permit approvals. But the community was outraged and they did not want it. So many community members flooded there to share their opinions of their abortion stigma, that they don't want a health center like Planned Parenthood in the community because they provide abortions. And that's not what our community needs. Overlooking that they provide life-saving care like cancer screenings, overlooking that it was a primary care health center, overlooking that it's also a health center that provides pediatric care. And it was crazy to me, but overall they did end up just holding off. We're still fighting in Visalia. The organizer out there, our public affairs director out there, our VP spend a lot of time in those areas. It is still on hold, but we're still working on expanding that process. But that's what it can look like, right? At an institutional level in law and policy in Fresno, I don't know if maybe some of you have heard this, maybe not, but they had a grant. They had a grant for $1 million come from the state to the city of Fresno because Planned Parenthood can't receive money federally. It has to go through the city. So they agreed that to give the $1 million to the city of Fresno, for the city of Fresno to give to Planned Parenthood. City of Fresno, the mayor did not agree with abortion. So he put his shared values and personal decision and vetoed it. He said, I'm not going to give Planned Parenthood that money. And that's what it looks like at a institutional level. People in power, because they don't agree with abortion or have this abortion stigma, are put in places of power to make these decisions. Luckily, Planned Parenthood stood up and so many people flooded city council, including Dolores Huerta, to give public comment and say, no, give the $1 million back to Planned Parenthood, who originally it belonged to. And they did, and that was so exciting. So that was a huge win. But that's what it looks like. That is how that's how abortion stigma impacts access. We see laws and policy, right? The overturning of Roe, media. So it is everywhere, and it is important to acknowledge, right, that this is how abortion stigma affects it. This is how it can look like at different levels, and just talking about it. So we can go to the next slide. It's the invisible force behind it, right? The defunding threats, the staff turnover, the low reimbursement rates. A lot of people may be being afraid to say abortion, and the misinformation, right? But this is why it is so important for us to have these conversations. This is why I feel so privileged and honored to be invited in a space like this, in a space of faith, to be talking about these important topics, talking about abortion, right? We see that clinics in these centers have fewer resources than counterparts like in Southern California or us in Northern California here. And many people just have to drive many miles away to access healthcare. So this is why abortion stigma should be really looked on, really hold elected officials accountable, right? To not have their personal values overlook, right, what is best for their community. And to continue, we're going to talk a little bit about faith leaders, right? I applaud all of you. I think you all are pillars in your community. You offer guidance, support, compassion, and a safe place for your congregation, and a safe for people of all backgrounds to come together and share beliefs. And I think it is so amazing even more that you all believe that every individual should have the right to make decisions about their body, including abortion, right? And I think this is disproving myself, right, all these years ago, little Elizabeth. And to continue, before further ado, I would want to introduce Jan, where she's going to kind of intertwine why faith and reproductive rights and health, justice, and freedom matter. So I'm going to go ahead and introduce Jan. Actually, I'll just go right.
Hello. Everyone knows now that I am Jan Stoner. I am here today to thank you, first of all, for being pro-choice faith leaders. And secondly, to emphasize why reproductive rights and reproductive health care and access to abortion is critical and essential. My story's beginning was 72 years ago in church. When I was born, I was in church within a week being blessed by the lay ministers. Thereafter, until I went away to the church college, I missed less than 10 Sunday church services. What you should say right now is this woman has her church's beliefs deep in the DNA of every cell of her body, and you would be correct. Without naming names, my church was very conservative, and my parents practiced the most conservative version there was. Our God's way was full of sacrifice and restrictions. My parents kept me on the straight and narrow with guilt, shame, and the holy terror of hell. The thought of burning for eternity in hell. As you can imagine, premarital sex and playing around was forbidden. But as a late teenager, I started doing things on the sly. And by the time I got to the church college, no less, the church college, and with a very good church boy, I was going all the way. And I was doing it the way all the other good church girls at college were doing it, by not admitting we were doing it. Because if we admitted it, well, we were going to hell. But by calling it a mistake or an oops, we could pray for redemption and for forgiveness and not go to hell. Whew, dodged that problem. But the day and night guilt remained, but I kept doing it anyway. And another aspect of admitting it would have meant logically that I would have gone and got birth control. But I could not do that. That was opening the trap door and jumping straight into hell. So there was no way I was getting birth control. Needless to say, I started having pregnancy scares. And in those days, there were no home pregnancy tests, which meant I had to go to the doctor. And that was horrible. But even in those old days, there were Planned Parenthoods. And I had a pregnancy test in Texas. Texas, think about that. Thereafter, in Alaska, a Planned Parenthood peer counselor talked to me on the street, and she said, "You go into that clinic right now and get birth control." And for some reason, my brain allowed me to do that, and the pregnancy scares stopped, but the guilt continued. Fast forward 15 years or so, and I had finished graduate school, I had a great career, and I had a fabulous partner. We were really fortunate to find each other because neither one of us wanted children. Full stop. Careers, not kids. We used birth control, and the unbelievable happened. I still got pregnant. So my 8-month pregnant friend went with me to Planned Parenthood where the pregnancy was confirmed. And then they told me I had to wait 3 weeks for an abortion because it wasn't legal to have an abortion until the 10th week. Well, I had morning sickness and everything else, and it was an abysmal 3 weeks before I had the abortion. Now, I want you to hear me really well and know that I'm telling you the truth, that since that procedure, I have not had one moment of shame or guilt because of that decision. I am being very honest, not a moment. I love being an aunt, not a mom. It's absolutely fabulous. And when my nieces and nephews go off to college, I look them straight in the eye and say, if you or your girlfriend gets pregnant and you want an abortion and you don't feel safe telling your parents, you call me, and I'll make sure you get a safe, legal abortion. Planned Parenthood allowed me to have the successful, productive, and mentally stable life that I have had. I am old enough now that people ask me the ins and outs and the ups and downs of my life. And in a very forthright way, I say, Planned Parenthood saved my life. And of the top 5 decisions in my life, the top 5 good decisions, one of them was having that abortion. In closing, I worked very hard to get the guilt out of my DNA. That's why I'm here talking to you today, that guilt. Because as pro-choice faith leaders, you will be there for your parishioners if they face a difficult medical decision. And you'll guide them through the noise and the rhetoric and the drama that is consuming us these days, which is trying to control their lives and their futures. So thank you very much for what you do and who you are.
Thank you so much, Jan, and your beautiful story. But yes, perfect transition into why pro-choice faith leaders matter, right? Why you take your voice against that rhetoric that you can't be a person of faith and support abortion. So, perfect, yes. Actually, I learned, right? So we do have a very long history of working with faith leaders. In the Central Valley, the first Planned Parenthood Center in Fresno was founded by in a Presbyterian church before moving to the Religious Center of Fresno State, which is now CSUF Fullerton, in the 1970s. And over the years, we have further just collaborated with faith-based organizations to advance issues of social and reproductive justice, which takes me to what the work within Planned Parenthood Marmonte we're doing. So here within Marmonte, we have a faith leaders network, and it's comprised of diverse faith leaders from many different parts of the region throughout California and Nevada, representing different backgrounds, faiths, gender identities, and this is all to increase public awareness of the theological and moral basis for advocating for reproductive justice. So we go ahead and continue to the next slide. And within that, we host quarterly meetings for faith leaders. You don't have to be technically a leader, right? You can, if somebody in your congregation who is highly active or wants to learn more about reproductive justice, rights, health, and freedom, I encourage them to join. We provide quarterly meeting workshops where we educate, provide updates. You have the opportunity to network and connect with other faith leaders from other parts of the community, like the Central Valley. And there's ways to break stigma, right? We encourage our faith leaders here within the network to amplify the message to people of faith that they can support all of these issues through partnership. Host community forums like this, right? You can take us back to your own congregations. Write opinion pieces, the op-ed for local publication. Invite us to your events, right? Whether that be a resource fair, if you're hosting a service, we will be there. We love to be in community. We love sharing resources. If you're doing anything for the holidays, whether it's drives, volunteer events, we would love to be there and support. Connecting with our staff, patients, and community members who seek religious counsel from faith leaders and seek reproductive justice. I think the faith leaders have been a really strong asset in also protecting reproductive rights. We also, just because you are based out here in San Mateo County up north, right, doesn't mean we can't go to Central Valley or go to Reno, right, and help with volunteering. When we go out to walk precincts for endorsed elected officials, I encourage y'all to come. I know sometimes it could be a trek, but we do also try to make a trip out of it. When we try to go out there and overturn seats, which could protect those reproductive rights of many and access to all. So our next meeting, we can go to the next slide. Our next meeting is actually this next month, March 6th. There's a QR code, but I also have a sign-up sheet over here if you want to sign up, and I can go ahead and just send you the details as well, where you can go ahead and attend. It starts at 11:30 a.m. March 6th. I believe it is a Tuesday or a Wednesday. And these are quarterly meetings. As I mentioned, there's so many faith leaders from all different backgrounds in parts of California and Nevada. So it's been amazing to be able to group so many people together from different areas, because we do learn about a lot more about different barriers that people within California are still accessing, right? How reproductive justice is still something that we should work on and not get too comfortable, right? We see how federal issues we see how issues in Texas can impact us federally. And we have to make sure that although we are the blueprint and we are spearheading through reproductive rights, there's still a lot of work to do, right? We still see it, abortion being banned in states, abortion's on the ballot in 2024 again. Abortion is one of the main decisions, main hot topics, right, for our presidential election as well. So this is why I'm so excited to be sharing this opportunity and that we've been able to connect with so many different communities. So my next slide, I believe, is just a thank you. So I appreciate you all. I wanted to be considerate of time because I think I might have been over. But thank you so much, everyone. It's such an honor and privilege to be here. I am very thankful to have been invited into this space.